all the things that are keeping you up at night as a founder, we've been through that, right? And we're happy to go through it with you, right? So you're not alone in that process. All my favorite moments, like, is when I get to be able to connect with founders, and just say, hey, like, you're not alone. This is something that I've seen many times before, right? All this thing that is really scary for you right now, super easy. Like, we can navigate it, even though it feels really, really hard right now.
So office hours was something that we first encountered as part of YC. And as the lore goes, YC office hours came from university office hours. So YC was iterative, was modeled after a lot of YC's program, and YC's program is actually modeled off of a lot of kind of like how universities and professors kind of work. And so a university professor also has office hours where they help students. And so it was modeled after that. The startup version of office hours is typically a 30-minute, 60-minute call that people in our program can book with us or any of our visiting partners. You can book with as many visiting partners as you want or partners as you want. You can book as many office hours as you want.
How I think about office hours, especially at Iterative, is go into the future and just have someone just tell you what all your mistakes are going to be, right? And so you can just fast forward through all those mistakes and get it over with, right? And so office hours achieves both those things. You get assigned a visiting partner who is a founder themselves, and so they're able to like jump into your team and help you problem solve in the same process. They've been through this same journey. Like, they might be a year in advance, 2 years in advance, 6 months in advance, right? And so they've been through the same journey as you, and so they can just tell you all the mistakes that they've made, right? And so you hopefully it'll be an easier process for you.
I think the thing that is surprising to maybe a lot of founders who are interested in being part of Iterative is they often will say something like, oh, you guys are an accelerator. We are too late stage for that, right? And I always have to tell them, I'm like, you're not too late stage. We work with companies that already have millions in revenue. And they say, how come we're not too late stage? And I basically tell them about office hours, which is we help you with whatever problems are currently facing them. If you were sitting in a bunch of lectures, which we don't do, and we were lecturing about early stage growth and you are a later stage company, yeah, it's not going to be relevant for you, right? But like, if the founder is a founder of a late stage company, then we just have very different conversations. Like, the things that are keeping late stage companies from growing are like, they're not hiring fast enough, or like, I don't know, they've like exhausted some growth channel and they need to find another one, or now they're doing paid marketing and their CAC is too high or whatever. And so, we deal with whatever problems are facing the company. And so it's kind of like infinitely flexible. And the other thing we typically tell to later stage founders is like, Brian and I and a lot of the visiting partners have basically run companies at all of the stages, right? Up until, like, Brian, for example, was like run a company that is like potentially going to IPO, right? And so, yes, we spend a lot of time with early stage companies, but like, there's no reasons where the same format doesn't work for later stage companies. The challenges that we work on are just different, right? The reason why we do office hours is because every startup is so unique and the challenges they face are super unique. And so the only way to like really help founders solve their problems is to like dedicated one-on-one time to like dig into their business, ask questions, and kind of like deal with their specific challenges. I don't know if this is obvious to everybody kind of watching, but the challenges are really unique because every startup is working in a different field, first of all. But then the strengths and weaknesses of the founders and the team that's working on the startup are also different. So if you think about kind of the differences between these two dimensions, like the output is just like wildly kind of like different. And so it takes a lot of like individual kind of help. I think that in large part, you can't be practically helpful to a startup if you are treating them as kind of like generally the same. And if you're primarily kind of doing lectures, that isn't a program that like Brian and I would have ever wanted to be kind of a part of. And so that's not the way that we kind of run Iterative. And so office hours is our way to kind of like dig in with companies on a like specific basis. Office hours is our like primary way to kind of help companies debug. The thing that we think a lot about at Iterative when we're working on startups is if we invest in your company, we obviously think then that you are working on an important problem and that your product has some solution that is novel or sufficiently differentiated. And if you're working on a problem that is important and your product is significantly kind of differentiated and better than what's out there, your startup should grow very fast. The reality, though, is most startups, even if those things are true, do not grow very fast in kind of their early stages. And the way that we think about it is those startups have bugs. And so bugs is something that comes up through kind of software engineering where you expect a program to work a certain way, but it does not work that way. And in a similar case, a startup should be growing, but is not growing. And then we have to go figure out why. So the first thing that we do in office hours is we look at their growth rate and we determine whether they're growing fast or slow. Fast for us is typically anywhere between 5 to 7% weekly, non-cumulative, and slow is anything basically below that. For early stage companies, they should be growing even faster than that. Okay, so if a company is growing fast, then the entire office hours is basically trying to drill into what is working. Like, is there a specific set of customers that we're finding a lot of kind of like traction with? How do we talk to more of them? How do we do more of whatever is working? If the company is not growing fast enough, then the question is, okay, well, why aren't you growing faster, right? And then that starts the debugging process of maybe you're talking to the wrong customers, maybe you're selling the wrong value proposition, or whatever the case is. Maybe, I don't know, you think your product is all about speed, but actually people care about being cheap. And so we have to kind of figure out what these problems are and so that we can solve them. And so office hours is in its entirety basically trying to kind of like answer these questions. And at the end of office hours, the founder should be able to walk away with like an understanding of why they're not growing that fast or why they are growing very fast, and then 2 to 3 things that they're going to work on in the next week so that they can keep their growth going fast or they can change their growth trajectory. And office hours typically happen once a week, and so the next week we can kind of talk about those 2 or 3 things that we talked about in the previous one and how did they turn out, what did we learn from them. And so we're building this kind of like weekly kind of iteration cycle of like, okay, what are the 3 things you're doing? Okay, why are you doing those? Okay, next week let's talk about these. Did they work? Did they not work? Okay, what's the next set? So we're building this kind of loop.
Reasons that office hours work really well is because it builds accountability. Each founder has to come once a week, or at least once a week actually, to office hours prepared, ready to present their metrics, ready to present what they have done or what they have not done. And it really helps to build that accountability, because if in week, say 3, you tell me you're going to do something, and then in week 4 you come and you haven't done it, it's almost like, coming without your homework done to like a class. And so that really helps to build that kind of like feedback loop, where you kind of make promises and you have to deliver on them.
There are these best practices that are good to have as an entrepreneur, right? Like, for example, setting a weekly goal, which is something we've kept doing ever since Iterative. We set a weekly goal to hit. Understanding why you didn't hit that goal. So every week now we have weekly all hands meetings. We kind of do a recap. Why didn't we hit our growth goal, or why did we? Why didn't we hit our product goal, and why did we? And the thing that we notice is that when you keep this kind of cadence of iterating on a weekly basis, not just on what you do to hit your growth goals or your product goals, or just like think about what you do as a company, you actually just make your company itself better and better. And so that's something we've noticed. Like, I've been talking to my team quite a bit recently. Once we hit this month where we were suddenly super successful, we did kind of like a flashback to when we had just started working together and how much worse it was. Right? And you don't realize it, but the more you kind of iterate on how you do things, the better you just become. It's just like, it really compounds. You stop making mistakes that you used to in the past. You kind of strive for perfection almost, because you're thinking about what went well, what didn't go well, what can we improve every single week. And before you know it, things are just transformed. That's what office hours felt like. It was really the exact same thing. How did the week go? Did you hit or not hit your core KPI? Why didn't you? Like, do a recap. What can you do to improve that, right? And when you just apply that specific kind of framework to different parts of your business, to different parts of your startup, everything improves that way. So for me, that was like the key unlock. It really made me feel like we became a better founding team, and we became better like leaders, managers, whatever you can call it. We became better startup founders for sure because of that.
So one thing Sue Ken always said to me was that, hey, Charles, most of the time you already know what you need to do. And I think that's true for most founders. I think we all sort of need to trust ourselves and pull the answer out of ourselves, right? And that's what a great coach does. So that's what office hours can provide. But sometimes it really helps to have just a little bit of like a push in that direction. So for me, it was being forced to focus on the same thing week after week. So as a founder, you get pulled in a million different directions. A million things come up, and it's really easy to lose focus. But hey, your partner's there to remember, hey, what was the most important thing we agreed on like for the next 8 weeks? It was that thing. How are you doing on that thing? And so it helps you have focus, and you know what you need to do about that thing. Like it's inside, but you just need to be reminded about it.
Like often I see that founders think they have, 1, 2, 3 biggest problems. And then as we talk and as I learn more about their company, we discover that actually those were not their biggest pain points and there's something else that they're missing. And that's just because it's so helpful to have like an outsider's opinion.
We're trying to pair each batch of founders with folks who have a bit more experience, have different perspective, to try to diagnose and address all the problems that makes this current startup unhealthy, right? And so you're just trying to solve all these problems. But a lot of founders, maybe it's ego, maybe it's something else, right? Are not as transparent, right? So they kind of push back. They're acting something out. They're acting okay, like everything's going great, right? When you have another founder sitting on this call, right? We know that nothing is going great, right? And so it kind of comes off as and then it becomes a more difficult relationship to be able to support them and diagnose their problems.
I don't know if you're familiar with this tech idea of you can have a rubber duck, which is sometimes in order to solution something, you kind of just need to talk, and somebody will basically just reflect and reply or just rephrase what you're saying, but they can bring a lot of clarity to your thoughts. Having this reflection was very useful to just refocus and turn those ideas into actionable steps.
Which is with Brian, was when we had asked him, Sukan, and Guillaume the same question, and he gave us totally different advice to what the other two gave. And it just made me realize, you can actually have, there are multiple ways still to skin a cat. It's not like everything's formulaic, but you can actually tackle the same problem in different ways and prioritize things differently. Across three guys are really, incredible entrepreneurs themselves. So that was another kind of core memory for me. They're just realizing there are really many ways to win, essentially.
Getting different perspectives, I really appreciate how Iterative had different mentors for different parts. So if we had something to have questions about B2B sales, or someone who had questions about product or engineering, being able to find those mentors that have experience in the space, who's built in the space, who have subject matter expert in the space, was so important. And so being able to have that flexibility, especially in office hours, there was a spreadsheet where we can look at, hey, this person does this really well. Even me chatting to Sylvia about customer support and how to hear them out in the right way was really important, because I come from a product background, and being able to actually manage these things in a kind demeanor was something that I didn't think about. I always thought I was a very nice, calm, demeanored person, but then there's even calmer and better way of saying things. And even being able to lean on different people to help me with these different areas of discipline and expertise was really, really helpful.
On the Sylvia's side, I kind of had a small argument with her and my co-founder about the fact that I really did not want to advertise in non-USD user countries with USD prices, and they convinced me otherwise, and especially and then I was okay, fine, I'll do it, just prove me wrong, and they did, and that was great. Having Sylvia being just do it, okay, it just made me do it, and then you feel a bit more comfortable, and it's humbling in a very good way. I think you need your thoughts to be challenged, and that's kind of the point of all of this. And sometimes you're right, but when the times you are wrong, you're kind of really happy that you have these moments.
So it's been a while, but I still remember that the chief metric that we were trying to hit was total class size. So a lot of things at Coders School have changed, but at the time, talking to Suken, he helped me realize what the biggest thesis that we had to prove at Coders School was. At the time, it was, hey, we can basically teach a lot more people online than we could in person. Yeah, my goal was like, I wanted to have 100 students in my class. Like we've never done more than like 25. So I think like 100 would be nuts. And I know that's not even true. I said, I think we can double it. I don't know. I think we can double it to 50. It's gonna be hard. And they're just like, Charles, what are you doing? You need like 1,000, like 1,000,000, like, you know, these types of things. And I was like, I went back to the team. I was like, guys, we got it being bigger. So somehow we got 100, and like Suken and Brian like were not like happy about the 100, or not like they're not unhappy. They're just like, I guess, fine. So that's how we started. But that was, and I can't remember if we hit it. I think we either hit it or we came very, very close. I think we hit it. It's been a while. But yeah, but like even to like consider doing that was crazy. And the focus of the whole team, the whole company, being like, okay, we gotta hit this number. That was some of the best focus we've ever had as a company.
He hit it. He hit that number. And I remember exactly what he was talking about, where he was like kind of shy about being like, oh, I think we can hit 100. And I think he thought that that was super ambitious. And I think we were kind of like, 100? Why is it so low, right? And this is kind of like what I was talking about, where it's kind of like, as a founder, sometimes you're like, it's funny, founders are like absolutely dreamers, but then when it comes to targets, sometimes they're like not. And so it's like your brain stops you from kind of thinking about these kind of like bigger things. And so you almost like sometimes need somebody to help you like dare to dream bigger on targets. It's like you wouldn't have like kind of like done that. And I think targets have this weird human psychological effect where it's kind of like, if you set a target, you tend to kind of try to get there, you know what I mean? And you kind of start working as an optimization problem. And so I find that like if somebody's kind of pushing you to kind of like go a bit further than kind of what you're thinking, you end up kind of like going a bit further than you're thinking. And so I think sometimes you just need somebody who is just kind of like, almost gives you permission to kind of like, and push you to like, I think you can do more than that, right?
Setting under ambitious goals. A lot of the companies in our batches are obviously quite early stage, and the mantra is that we want them to grow 5 to 7% a week. But for some companies, 7% a week is actually too low, because say if you have 10 users, then 7% a week isn't going to get you very far throughout a few months. And so office hours can be ineffective if your goals are just weak, because then you're kind of coming to office hours saying, yep, I've achieved everything. And we're just not having kind of an ambitious enough conversation. And I think that's also something that it's solvable.
Sometimes you actually learn more by trying to go after something that you didn't think you could kind of like achieve. And it's very often that like, if I ask you to grow 10x faster in like 2 months, you're going to have to now entertain a bunch of stuff that you didn't previously entertain. And so you're going to learn faster because now you're entertaining things you just didn't think about before. And you're getting stretched to your limits. And so you learn faster typically when you're kind of like stretched. So like I studied math in school, and one of the like classic things you do in math when you're trying to understand kind of like a new subject is you basically look at the extremes, right? Where you're like, oh, you want to learn a lot about math, try to divide by 0. And you try to kind of being like, yeah, that's weird, right? And so you learn a lot at the extremes. And so sometimes I apply that to kind of like startups, where I'm just kind of like, to understand their problem space, I'm like, I try to push them to their extremes, even if we're not going to actually do those things, just to kind of like understand the space better, right?
Not hitting number is like kind of a nightmare in some ways, where you like have to be like, okay, how do I deliver this? And the immediate thing you do when you have this accountable person, you start thinking, well, like, how do I explain this? And having a person that you're explaining this to who has been there before, like some stuff you don't need to make excuses for. Like sometimes things happen and they're there, but also you can't really just BS your way through it. You can't be like, oh, like, the economy's down, or what, I don't know, whatever startup people say to try to make themselves feel better. Like they won't take that from you, right? Or, oh, we just need to increase our marketing budget for next week. These kinds of things, you don't get away with that stuff. So it really forces you to critically examine why you failed. And there's no like judgment. There's no like, you failed, get out of here, throw out of the program. Like there's none of that. It's just really honest diagnosis postmortem.
So the majority case of what happens at office hours is people don't hit their targets. Right? Startups are hard, right? Like they set ambitious targets. And by the way, if you grow 5% a year, 5% a week for a year, you'll grow 12.6x. And if you grow, 7% a year, it's like 33x or something like that. Like the rate at which we're trying to get startups to grow is really fast. And so it's really hard to kind of hit these targets. And so the majority of time people come in, and it's kind of funny because they'll come in. I should play a game next time where I try to guess whether they hit their targets based on their facial expressions as they come in before they actually show it to me, because I think I'm like 95% correct. And typically what ends up happening is if they don't hit their targets, they're a little sheepish and they delay showing their scorecard. Like they try to make small talk and all this kind of like nonsense, and they're like delaying because it's like they know once they show their scorecard, I'm going to kind of drill into them. And it's kind of like an unpleasant experience. If people hit their targets and they come into office hours, they don't even wait for office hours to start. They've like already shared their screen and their graph is up and they're like, see, we hit the target, right? So you can totally tell. Okay, so in the case that people don't hit their targets, the thing that ends up happening is I ask them why, right? If you don't hit your targets, but you can explain why you weren't able to hit your targets, you're like, look, we made these 3 bets. Here are the reasons why we made these bets. They did not pan out. They didn't end up being true, right? And they didn't turn out to be true. Here's what we learned from them. Here's what I think we should do next. Here's the reasons why I think we should do those things. And so that to me is perfectly acceptable. That's just the process, right? Cool. You set a target, you tried to hit the target, you didn't hit the target. You had good reasons for why you thought you were going to be able to hit the target. They ended up not being true. You have a new set of reasons for what you're going to do the following week, right? Perfectly acceptable. Now, if you do that over and over and over and you keep being wrong, then we start having to take a step back and we're like, hey, we keep thinking one thing and we keep being wrong. Like there's something fundamental that we don't understand about what we're doing, right? Because we keep being wrong, right? And so there's some fundamental thing that we don't understand. We need to dig a little bit deeper. And so, okay, eventually we'll have to kind of dig deeper. The unacceptable thing that happens at office hours is when people don't hit their targets and they can't tell me what they tried. They can't tell me what they learned. They can't tell me why they did those things. And they have no plan for what to do for it. Then I'm pissed. And the reason why I'm pissed is because I'm like, what have you guys been doing? Right? Like you can't just show up and be like, we didn't hit our targets. And you haven't thought about why. You haven't kind of obsessed about what you're going to do. Like, and that is behavior to me very clearly. Okay, once or twice, I'm not going to be very happy about it, but like, fine, right? But consistent behavior like that is like surefire death for your startup. You are 100% going to die. I don't have to know anything else. Like you are definitely going to die. And you are going to die because you are not learning anything and you are not engaged in the process of like learning about your customers or like trying to kind of get better, right? And there's a certain agency part with this where sometimes startups will show up and they'll be like, I didn't hit the targets. And I'll be like, okay, well, why? And they're like, it was the holidays. Sales cycles are long. And it's like none of those things, they act like they don't have control over any of those things. And like, I get it that like, you probably don't have control over the holidays, but the holidays is like 1 week. You can't use holidays to like talk about an entire month of growth, right? And I think that's when I get really pissed off because it's like, if you don't feel like you can make a difference in how your startup is going and the trajectory of your startup, what the hell am I spending my time like talking to you about, right? Like if you don't have that belief, I'm not going to spend my time kind of like trying to get you to believe that. Like that's like babysitting to me, right? So like the minimum a founder needs to have when they show up to these office hours is like having agency and belief that like they can make changes to what they're doing to get where they're trying to go. And I will help you the entire time and happily kind of do that. But I'm like not in the business of like trying to get founders to kind of like engage with their startups. I'm like, dude, you're the founder of this company. Like if you aren't engaged, nobody's going to be engaged. You're screwed. Like save me the time for having to kind of sit on this call with you. And so I think that does happen a fair bit. And I think sometimes when I do point that out to founders, they do kind of like get it. And look, founders go through ebbs and flows of this where they're like very engaged and they have a couple of weeks of kind of not hitting their target, they get dismissed, they get kind of come down, and we got to pick them back up. But I think like a consistent baseline of like kind of throwing your hands up is like really unacceptable. And then that's when I think I'm like somewhat famous for yelling at people in office hours, and this is the majority of the yelling as it kind of like happens. And so
there was one time in the last batch where this founder booked office hours with me, and I wasn't sure if I could help them. I mean, they were working on this very technical, like hardware stuff, which is really not my field. And I was getting a bit nervous. I mean, I didn't want to sound silly. It turned out that this founder actually didn't want to talk about hardware, but they wanted to talk about being a female founder. And so essentially, she was fundraising, and there were some prospective investors that were treating her, I mean, completely inappropriately. And they were essentially asking her about all these intricate details of her, you know, plans to have children or whatever, instead of doing actual due diligence, like on her actual business. And so we talked for a long time, because I obviously do have experience being a female founder, and I've experienced, you know, similar struggles when running my company and when fundraising. And so I think that session really stood out to me, because I think the whole point of office hours is getting a new perspective and being able to leverage mentors with like different types of experiences. And so in this case, I mean, I obviously didn't have a solution for this founder, because I mean, I don't know how to solve gender discrimination, but I think just talking about it helps, right? And that's what office hours are for. It's kind of this judgment-free zone where you can talk through anything and everything. And yeah, I remembered that for sure.
I think Aaron was absolutely amazing. So Aaron was not my partner at all, but Aaron understood my space. So it was very technical and really hard. And Aaron just reached out, and Aaron's like, hey, do you want to chat sometime? I remember on a Saturday, he spent hours and hours just helping me prepare for my demo day pitch. And he's like, no, this doesn't make sense. This makes sense. And I remember going from demo day prep, where everyone's like, I don't really understand what you're doing. It just doesn't make sense, to everyone being like, oh my God, this is one of the best pitches I heard. And honestly, I think it was 100% Aaron, not me at all. And he's just been so helpful. But one of the most memorable moments was him just repositioning things for me in a way that made a lot more sense. Because this is actually something really interesting that I'm learning more and more, is pitching and sales is so different to pitching to investors. And the reason for that is pitching to sales is people generally already have the problem. They understand the technical space, you're using particular words and it makes sense. But then pitching to investors, half the time, they don't understand the problem, they don't see the problem exists, and they also don't understand the terminology. So the framing is actually very different as well, and you have to think about it very differently. So I think being able to switch between the two and trying to learn from the two, I think that was incredibly helpful for me, and something that I'm just getting used to right now, and being able to switch mindsets across the two is something that I'm learning. And yeah, Aaron was incredible with that.
I think 2 or 3 weeks, no, 2 weeks into the program. So for the listeners who don't know, when we got into Iterative, we had an idea of an idea. It wasn't a fully fleshed out idea. It was really an idea of an idea. And really the first week was really about how do we kind of validate that. And so by validation, you typically go through different ways, different frameworks to do that. And for us specifically, we were just talking to a lot of users. So we're doing stuff like paid interviews. We'd pay people $10 to come and chat with us and talk about their problems. And I think at one point, Jean and we did something like 60 user calls in 5 days. So we're doing 12 user calls a day, and each user call would last roughly 45 minutes to 1 hour. So we're doing literally from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. for pretty much a week straight, just user calls. The next Monday, when we showed up, we still looked super fatigued. We were super tired, but we had learned so much that by the time we got there, it was like we were a totally different company. And that office hours with Guillaume was like, wow, you guys have done a lot of progress. You've made a lot of progress. You guys have understood the problem way better than you did last week. What are we going to do now? And so that kind of, I guess, that feeling of progress, from validating an idea and a problem to actually knowing what do you do now to capitalize, I think that was the key kind of memory for us, because that was like when we started actually building product again for the first time, right? So that was like a big, I guess, milestone for us within the program. And then the first time we made revenue was also in the program. So we booked our first dollar revenue. I think we launched a pretty hacky MVP. We made something like 3K in revenue in our first month. And again, another big kind of milestone hit, from something that had zero, it was really just an idea of an idea, to something that was actually making revenue, was super exciting. So again, like a high that I think no entrepreneur will forget is like when you make your first dollar.
I've actually had founders who asked me that question. Don't be shy. I think don't be shy and ask as many questions, and don't be afraid to book meetings with anyone who you think might be helpful. The 12 weeks will go by so quickly, and you'll have questions on marketing, you'll have questions on customer service, you'll have questions on how to do sales, and don't be shy. I think the first few weeks I was a bit shy to book meetings with people. And I think, if you ask Brian, like the last weeks I was booking meetings with everyone, and Brian was like, seems like you're booking meetings with everyone. But you learn so many different perspectives in such a short amount of time, because these people have done it before, these founders, these mentors have done it before, they've been really good at the industry about it, and so they'll probably give you a different perspective that you didn't think about, and it'll accelerate your learning so much more quicker. So I would say don't be shy, book time with everyone, get to know all the different mentors, and then see who you bounce off the most with, and then just go from there. And I think that will be really, really helpful for any founder on the next 12 weeks of the journey.
Don't be shy. I think a lot of founders think that we'll sort of talk to them during this session, but they can't leverage us for other activities. But actually, we're very happy to, or at least personally, like I'm very happy to review a deck, play with your demo, listen to your sales call, whatever it is that you can derive value from. Please ask. Like, we're at your disposal.
It's going to be very academic, but be prepared. Actually, there's no stupid questions. You don't have to be an expert in everything. You can't be an expert in everything. So if you feel that right now what you need is just a very basic course, or just something, again, there's only that many things that you can know.
The way I would frame it is, what are office hours about, right? Office hours are about how do you help your lead partner help you. So that's my view of things. It's like going to a therapist. You can't really go to a therapy session and just have no idea what to work on. Maybe there's something bugging you, there's something that you want to work out, there's an emotion you're feeling. In the same way with office hours, there's something in your business that you don't understand or you're not happy about that you want to fix. And so I think just having very clear image of what you want to do for the week is just going to help you a lot. So you go to the office hours with Brian and Suki and say, hey guys, so our corp KPI is this. We want to grow it by this. We want to hit this number. This is what's stopping us. This is the problem that we're facing. And these are the things I've kind of run through in my head. This is what I'm thinking of doing. This is the reasons why I don't want to do them. These are other alternatives. What do you think we should do? Right? When you kind of lay it out on a platter, it's much easier to dissect, and it just makes it easier for them to kind of give you advice and help you pick apart your logic. If you come to them with something that's super broad and super general, you're going to spend a lot of the office hours kind of narrowing down what to do, right? And that wastes a lot of time. What you want to be doing is maximizing the amount of insights you're getting from them, the amount of frameworks, the amount of tactics that they have. And the way you do that is just come prepared with the exact problem that you want to fix. What solutions have you thought of trying, or have you already tried? Why didn't they work? And a specific call or specific ask. Do you want advice? Do you want to talk to someone that they know who can help fix this for you? Do you need a framework? Do you need them to kind of hop on and look at your data and make sense of things? Right. So you have to have a very clear ask at the end of the day. So those are 3 things.
I think people underestimate how valuable office hours is until they've done it, and then they don't have it anymore, right? And we say this at orientation, but the best way to get the most value out of having office hours is to basically be prepared. And by be prepared, I mean, there's a metric scorecard, fill out all of your metrics, understand your metrics, be able to answer the question of why you're under target or why you're above target, and then be able to kind of talk about what learnings you had about your customer that week, and then what you think you're going to do next time. And I think all of the companies who do that, I can't guarantee they're going to be successful. There's a lot more kind of factors in play, but like you want to give your startup the best shot possible. And I think you want to get the most out of our program as possible. And it's kind of like going to school. It's like, I remember people used to tell me, it's like, you're going to get out of university what you put into university. And it's kind of the same case here for the office hours. And so I would just be like, the preparation I think is really important. And the more prepared you are, the more you're going to get out of it. But it's also going to be a more pleasant experience, because I think for a lot of people who run office hours like me, if somebody is not prepared and they're not thinking about their business, I'm going to be able to tell very quickly.
I would say like immediately, like when you pitch your business or your plan or whatever you're trying to do, like what's the thing you're most nervous about saying, right? Like if you were to give like the investor update or something, and you of course you probably get stuff to the top, and then what's the stuff you don't want to put there? Talk about that stuff. Like don't waste time like being like, guess what? We had all these great things happen. Like unless they're really, really good, right? But really just try to focus on the other stuff. Like, oh my gosh, like, hey, this didn't work. I thought this would work, but this didn't. And that's where you get a lot there. Like, of course, we all need to pick you up from time to time, but that's kind of like, you can have other people tell you that stuff. What you really want is someone that you can honestly talk about stuff you're terrified of that you don't know.
Founders focus on the wrong issues, and they sort of come to office hours with like a predetermined idea of what they want to talk about. And if that's not actually their biggest problem, it's really hard for the visiting partner to sort of discover like what's actually going on.
Commit like to the process. So signing up for office hours in some ways is similar to going into a fitness class, right? There's this amazing experience where if you just don't need to think that much and you just follow exactly what someone else is telling you, then you'll naturally do really well, right? You can naturally push yourself. All you have to do is focus on being present and just continue to push yourself, right? Where you don't have to like worry about, am I doing the right thing, right? And so office hours is an opportunity where someone else can offer you perspective and you can just commit to it, right? And just see, and they are able to often in kind of our day to day, we're constantly questioning, is this the right thing to do? Is this the most important thing to do, right? And just having another perspective, say, no, just do this, right? Is very clarifying, and also it gives us the ability to just execute really efficiently and really effectively. And so similar to a kind of fitness class where you really get what if you show up for it, right? And you fully commit to it, then you can get a lot out of it, right? You'll just naturally be fit on the other side. And office hours, like in its best, like when it's in its most sincere, tries to do that for founders.